What if the words you use to care are causing your children to pull away? It's hard to imagine, because everything we say as parents, or almost everything, comes from love. We want to protect, advise, prevent mistakes. We want to stay close. But sometimes, without realizing it, what we say doesn't bring us closer. It pushes them away. Words can be like hugs or like walls. Sometimes, unintentionally, we build distance instead of bridges. And that hurts, because there is no quieter pain than watching a son or daughter begin to answer in monosyllables. Watching calls get shorter, visits become more spaced out. And there you are wondering, what did I do wrong? Why do I feel like I'm becoming a bother instead of a refuge? Most likely, you haven't done anything wrong. You simply used words you learned, words that slipped out without thinking, words your own parents might have said once. But the emotional impact these words can have on adult children can be deeper than you imagine. Today we're going to talk about that. About 6 very common phrases that many mothers and fathers say with the best intentions, but that, unknowingly, can create a rift between them and their children. Phrases that may not seem offensive, but can generate guilt, pressure, or emotional disconnection. This is not a video to judge. It's an invitation to awareness, to gentle change, to language that unites instead of hurts. Because when love is real, it can also transform. It can also learn to speak differently, to care through freedom, not through guilt, to stay close, without invading. Stay until the end, because the last phrase is one we've all said at some point out of love. But it can hurt more than you imagine. And if you recognize it, you might still have time to change it. Phrase number 1. Do whatever you want. You don't need me anymore. There are phrases that sound like surrender, but are actually a silent cry of pain. Do whatever you want. You don't need me anymore, is one of them. Have you ever said it? Sometimes it's said with sadness, other times with a certain hardness. But almost always it carries a tone that adult children instantly detect, passive-aggressive. And although it might seem like an innocent phrase, what it often provokes is an uncomfortable mix of guilt, irritation, and distance. Because behind those words, what really reaches the child's heart is, you're leaving me behind. You're forgetting about me. I'm no longer important to you. Imagine this scenario. An adult son decides to move to another city for work. He's excited, but he knows it will mean seeing his mother less. When he tells her, hoping for understanding, or at least an honest conversation, she replies with a dry voice, "Do whatever you want. You don't need me anymore." He goes silent. He doesn't know what to say. He feels like he's done something wrong, that he's failing as a son. And at the same time, he feels manipulated, caught between his desire to move forward in life and the guilt of hurting the person who loves him most. This phrase is often said from a deep emotion, the sense of lost control, the anguish of feeling that children no longer consult you, that they make their own decisions, that they no longer need you. And yes, that feeling is valid. It's natural. For decades you were their guide, support, compass. Now they walk on their own, and that hurts. But saying it in that way, in that tone, doesn't open doors. It closes them. What you really want is not for them to just do whatever they want. What you want is to feel included, to have them tell you, include you, consult you, even if they don't really need it. You want to continue being present. So, what could you say instead? A more sincere, more respectful, more emotionally mature alternative might be, "I don't share your decision, but I trust you to handle it your way." With that phrase, you're not giving up your opinion. You're not denying that it hurts, but you're also not throwing an emotional dagger. You're saying, "I'm still here. Even though it's hard for me, I choose to respect you." Because when children feel they don't have to defend themselves, when they feel they can make mistakes without being punished with silence, guilt, or sadness, they come back. They draw closer. They seek you out. Not because you pressure them, but because they know they can be themselves with you. Words don't just convey ideas, they convey emotions. And this one, "Do whatever you want, you don't need me anymore," often conveys, a goodbye disguised as permission. But you still have time to turn that farewell into a gesture of trust. You just have to change your words and let love speak a different language, one that doesn't cling but also doesn't push away. Phrase number 2, after everything I've done for you. This phrase might seem like a reminder, but in reality, it's a burden. After everything I've done for you. Said with a hurt voice, with eyes seeking acknowledgement, and with a heart that feels unappreciated. It's a phrase that turns love into debt. And debt, even when it comes from something noble, pushes people away when it's imposed. The person who says it usually has reasons, because of course you did a lot. You sacrificed your time, your body, your youth. You gave up dreams, you lost sleep, you worried, you fought to give them the best. And none of that should be minimized. But when that dedication becomes a bargaining chip, the relationship suffers. After everything I've done for you stops being an expression of pride and turns into a direct pass to guilt. Because the child can't give you back everything you did, nor should they. They can't live their life as if it's all about repaying you. And when they feel a constant debt, often what they feel is rejection. Imagine this. A father expects his son to call him every weekend, but the son has children, a job, his own busy life. 1 week passes, then another. Finally he calls, somewhat tired, somewhat distracted, and the father, instead of saying, "I'm glad to hear from you," hits him with, "After everything I've done for you." Silence on the other end lasts longer than the conversation, because the son doesn't know what to say. He knows it's true, but he feels he can't live under that shadow. What started as love ends up feeling like a bill. And the saddest part is that often this is said out of a very human need, to feel valued, acknowledged, seen. But admiration and gratitude cannot be demanded. They must be inspired, and many times they arise more naturally when they aren't forced. What can you do then? First, change the way you look at it. Instead of saying, "After everything I've done for you," you could say, "I'm proud to have given you so much love, and for me, that's enough." Because when a child hears that, they don't feel debt, they feel love. And true love doesn't create guilt. It inspires a desire to reciprocate, but freely. Words can be anchors or wings. And even though your dedication as a mother or father was immense, remember this. You did it out of love. And if you did it out of love, it shouldn't become a contract, but a legacy. One that doesn't demand repayment, but is remembered with tenderness. Because when a child feels that love has no conditions, they don't run away. They come back. Not out of obligation, but out of affection. Phrase number 3. You used to be different. You used to be different. Said with a nostalgic tone, but hiding a wound. As if change were betrayal. As if growing up were pulling away. And that phrase, though it may not seem like it, is a way of telling the other person, "I liked you more when you were who I needed you to be." Often this phrase is said without bad intentions. It's spoken from surprise, from the confusion of seeing a child who no longer behaves as before, who thinks differently, who no longer needs so much. But to the one who hears it, it doesn't sound like observation. It sounds like judgment. Let's imagine a scenario. Mary, mother of 2, was always very close to her younger daughter. They shared tastes, secrets, laughter. But over the years, the daughter began making different choices. She moved to another city, changed partners, changed career paths. And when she calls, she no longer asks for advice. She just informs. One day, in the middle of a chat, Mary says with a sigh, "It's just that you used to be different." And on the other side, her daughter remains silent. Because what she hears is not admiration for her growth, it's disappointment. That phrase can unknowingly invalidate someone's evolution. It can make the child feel that their growth wasn't valuable, but rather hurtful to the one who loves them most. Because growing up means letting go of former versions of ourselves. And when a parent clings to the child that once was, they struggle to love who they are now. But change isn't betrayal, it's life. And just as we've changed over the years, our children do too. They have the right to transform, to think differently, to step away a bit in order to find themselves. Saying, "You used to be different," is not just a lament. It's a way of freezing the present and holding on to a past that will never return. And when children feel they must remain who they were to be loved, they end up distancing themselves to be who they are in peace. What can you say instead? Something as simple as, "I see you're changing, and I want to understand your journey better." Or even, "I'm discovering new sides of you, and that's also wonderful." Because when a child feels they can change without losing your love, they open up, trust, and come back. And that new version, different, which you might not fully understand, also deserves to be embraced. After all, isn't that what we need most when we change? For someone to say, "I don't entirely recognize you now, but I still love you." Words can open doors or close them forever. And sometimes it's enough to let go of the child who was in order to embrace the one who is, and accompany them without fear as they discover who they're becoming. Phrase number 4. You'll see what happens when your children do the same to you. You'll see what happens when your children do the same to you. A phrase that sounds like a prophecy, but wounds like punishment. It's not said to promote understanding, but from undigested pain. It's the most common and most subtle way of seeking emotional revenge on a child. The person saying it often doesn't notice. They feel hurt, ignored, replaced. And instead of putting those feelings into words, they throw out a sentence. When you have your own kids, you'll know what it feels like. But what seems like a warning becomes a wall. Because that phrase doesn't invite understanding or dialogue. It only leaves the other person feeling guilty and distant. Let's picture a typical scene. During a family meal, there's a small argument between a mother and her adult son. He didn't attend a birthday event, and she, feeling hurt, responds, "Don't worry, you'll see what happens when your children do the same to you." Suddenly, the atmosphere cools. The son doesn't respond. He lowers his gaze. Because he realizes it's no longer just about what happened. It's about a festering reproach disguised as karma. The result? Instead of prompting reflection, it provokes resentment. Instead of bringing you closer, it creates distance. This phrase makes love feel like a never-ending debt and turns every mistake the son makes into a future threat. But the relationship between parents and children shouldn't be lived as a scale of justice. It's not, "You did this to me, so someday the same will happen to you." It's, "What you did hurt me, so I talk about it. I don't project it." What does the child feel upon hearing that phrase? Attack, judgment, and above all, a lack of understanding. They feel that their mistake no longer has any context, that they've been condemned without the chance to defend themselves. And the saddest part, they start feeling that what they give will never be enough. What can be said instead? Something as simple as loving as, "I hope your kids love you as much as I love you, even if I sometimes don't know how to show it." Because behind that sometimes clumsy love, there's more than meets the eye. Sometimes children hurt without meaning to, not because they don't love, but because they don't know how to show it. And when they receive words of forgiveness instead of punishment, they come closer. They reflect. They change. Because true learning doesn't come from guilt, but from love that even when hurt, chooses not to harm. Phrase number 5. You never treated me that way. You never treated me that way. It's a phrase born from pain, but it sounds like a resentful comparison. A statement that, without intending to, places the child at the center of a competition they never asked for. It's often said when the child shows affection, attention, or generosity towards someone else, a partner, the in-laws, a close friend, even a sibling. And in that moment, the father or mother feels a little stab in the heart and blurts out, "How interesting. You never treated me that way." But what does that parent really feel? Displacement, neglect, a sense of having lost a position they thought was guaranteed. And they say it in a phrase that seems mild, but weighs like guilt. Imagine a mother watching her son plan a trip to visit his partner's family, but he hasn't dropped by her place in months. Instead of expressing sadness, She says, "You never took me on a trip. You never treated me that way." Suddenly, what could have been an honest conversation turns into an emotional battleground. Because the son doesn't hear love, he hears comparison. He doesn't hear need, he hears judgment. And that hurts. Because often the son is doing the best he can, with his time, his energy, his own guilt. What does this phrase provoke? Frustration, guilt, and often distance. The child feels that no matter what they do, there's always a debt to be paid. They feel they can't build new relationships without destroying the old ones. They feel their growth, instead of being celebrated, is seen as betrayal. So, what can you say instead? A phrase that conveys acceptance without competition. "I'm glad you've built a family in your own way." Because with that phrase, you say everything you really mean. I see you, I acknowledge you, and even though it sometimes hurts, I celebrate your journey. Being a mother or father also means learning to let go without resentment, and understanding that the love a child gives to others is not love they take away from you. It's love you helped sow, and that now blooms in new directions. When you learn to see that without comparing yourself, the child doesn't pull away. They come closer, not out of obligation, but because you make them feel free to love without guilt. Phrase number 6. You know best, said with resignation. You know best. 2 words. Simple, but carrying a weight that falls directly on the heart. Because it's not a neutral phrase. It's not a show of trust, as many believe. When it's said with resignation, with lowered shoulders, or that dry tone we all recognize, it becomes a sentence of silent disapproval. It's like saying, "I don't agree, but do whatever you want. I have no voice here anymore." And the child feels it. They feel that instead of support, there is judgment. That instead of companionship, there is distance. Imagine a father hearing his son talk about quitting his job to pursue a personal project, and the father, instead of asking questions, opening up space for dialogue, says with a cold voice, "Well, you know best." And with that, he cuts the bridge. The son doesn't feel understood. He doesn't feel openly criticized either. He feels something worse, indifference masked as freedom. Because that phrase, said that way, leaves no room for explanation, for sharing fears, for building trust. It's a wall, disguised as apparent acceptance. And often, it causes exactly the opposite of what you want. That the son distances himself more, that he stops sharing things, that he chooses silence to avoid that silent judgment. What could be done differently? You can express disagreement without hurting. For instance, "It's not what I would do, but if you believe in this and need support, I'm here." That phrase doesn't reject dialogue. It doesn't leave the other person alone in their decision. It opens a door. Because we all, even adults, even grown children, need to know that our parents still believe in us, that they can disagree without withdrawing emotionally. You know best, said with resignation, closes the door. But I'm here, even if I don't fully understand, opens it. And in the end, that's the root of any strong bond. Not control, not total approval, but the companionship that stays, even when paths diverge. The invisible wound, what isn't said, but is felt. Sometimes, it's not what we say, it's what we don't say. That silence that lingers, that look that drops when something displeases us, that brief moment of disapproval that lasts just a second, but pierces forever. Because children don't just hear words, they sense the energy. They pick up the tone, the pause, the tension in the air. You might never say, "I'm disappointed in you," but if you frown every time they mention their partner, if you change the subject when they talk about something you don't understand, if you cross your arms when they make a decision different from yours, the message still arrives. Only it arrives wrapped in discomfort, in distance, in that sense that being around you is not easy. And so, children protect themselves, not because they don't love you, but because they're tired of feeling like everything they do needs approval, or correction, or interpretation. That's why, so often, the distance isn't punishment, it's self-defense, a barrier to preserve their freedom, their inner peace, their identity. And the real question is, what is it in us that needs healing so we don't project it onto them? Maybe it's the fear of being alone, the nostalgia for when they depended on us, or the unresolved pain of feeling unappreciated. Healing those inner wounds is not only an act of self-love, it's an act of love toward them. Because the more peace we have inside, the less we feel the need to judge, control, or make demands. And the more able we are to see our children for what they are: complete, different, free, who still need our love, but no longer our permission to be themselves. Changing the way we speak doesn't mean we stop being parents. It doesn't mean giving up our experience or staying silent about our hurts. It means something deeper. Understanding that love can also be trained. That words don't just say, they build. And sometimes, without realizing it, we build distance. When we change a phrase, when we soften a judgment, when we stop speaking from a wound and start speaking from respect, the relationship changes. Tension eases. Listening returns. Closeness comes back. It's not magic, it's awareness. Maybe today you realize that one of these phrases has left your lips, or maybe you've heard them yourself, and at last you understand why they hurt so much. But it's not about blaming ourselves, it's about waking up. Because it's never too late to say it differently, to love in a clearer, freer, kinder way. The way we speak can completely change the way we love. If any of these phrases resonated with you, I invite you to leave a comment. Did you identify with this? Have you heard any of these phrases in your life? Or have you perhaps said them yourself without realizing it? Tell us about your experience. And if you think this message can help someone else, share it. Subscribe if you want to keep learning how to love more consciously, because healing our relationships starts with healing our words.